tonight we have a collection of speakers here to talk about all of our work here in the gallery. Our show is called Smorgasbord and Art Collaboration. So I guess let's kick this off by starting with Ryan.
Guys, my name is Ryan. I am a sculpture maker over here at SEMA, and I wanted to give you a little bit of insight about my work and this piece of it. So this piece is a lot about social groups and social kind of niches and stuff like that. So it's like a lot of my work is about general school and, you know, K-12 education and social groups. I'm very interested in a lot of sociology and psychology. This piece in particular is about that, sociology and psychology and how we kind of tend to break from the norm and kind of break away from certain social groups at times, and how we generally kind of give some people a rap in some ways, and social groups and kind of push them away. It's very open to interpretation, and I wanted to give that kind of feel of strapped down and kind of breaking away from the norm, kind of like how the rubber bands kind of represent that. And I really enjoy a lot of metal sculpture, and but I've been experimenting with new materials with this, so I incorporated a lot of different kinds of 3D filing, rubber bands, mixed media, different kinds of wood and stuff like that in my work. I really enjoyed this piece a whole lot. I think it photographed well whenever I was like making it, and it was very fun to make it. I was very excited about it, and I was very excited to put it into the exhibition. So, if you have any questions, let me know. Yeah.
Any questions from those of you who are here, or questions from Zoom land? Joe would be in charge of Zoom land. Any questions? Any questions from anyone here? Okay, I got a question if you don't mind. Could you talk about the arrangement of the pieces on the pedestal, or how do you figure that out, or what goes through your mind when you're thinking about this piece and that piece together?
Oh yeah. So whenever I was thinking about how this should like look on the pedestal, it was more over like, you know, how I wanted to sit and how I wanted the centerpiece to at least be 3 centerpieces there, and I wanted it to kind of stair step up to give it more variety in the piece as well. So and then also I wanted the outliers of the group, kind of these 2 sole wood pieces without the 3D printed element, to kind of be almost broken in a way. Because, you know, when you think about it, when you're ejected from a social group, you're kind of, you know, broken, or like, you know, in a slump or in a way, you know, and it's kind of really depressing sometimes to be in that position. So I wanted to give that feel of that, and then one of them I wanted to give that kind of feel of like breaking away. So that's why I kind of put it off to the side and grouped up together with the rest of the piece. So yeah.
Other questions?
Okay, so yeah, that's actually a really great question. So the way I cut it is I would use a bandsaw, but I laminated the pieces of wood together first. So I laminated them with glue, of course, and then I would cut them at angles and measure out the angles, of course. And it was very odd how to position that in the bandsaw, but I figured it out. I'm really glad I did, because it turned out perfect.
Any other questions for Ryan?
So I see that you have like a lot of kind of structures that are shaped like a house, and then you have like one little pyramid kind of out to the side. What's that all about?
So I wanted to give that kind of feeling of like the outlier of the group of the triangle pyramid, rather than just the square pyramids. And it was kind of more or less like, you know, a stylistic choice rather than a conceptual choice, I guess is what the way you could put it as. But as for the house-like structures, I wanted them to be more like an obelisk, kind of like, you know, standing at the top of the obelisk, kind of like, you know, like a group leader, and then like there's like a subordinate or, you know, whatever you want to call it. So that's the reasoning for like the more pointy kind of aspect to it.
Any other questions or any questions from Zoom? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. So what we're going to do is we're going to, Cora, which one you would like to talk about this with you? So, Joni, we okay, this is a heavy table. What do you think? Is that going to be okay?
Okay. Hi, I'm Cora Coleman, and I guess I can talk about this piece because like conceptually what I'm really working with now. And so this piece has like actually a lot of fantasy elements to it, you know, everything that you would think of when it comes to fantasy and movies and video games and stuff like that's represented here, you know, the good versus the evil, the good fight. But mostly I work in fantasy because of things that have influenced me through growing up, hobbies I've had, and things I've enjoyed, like Magic the Gathering, and then like fantasy books and stuff like that. So I kind of want my work to represent that feeling of adventure and exploration and world building. So that's represented in this piece. And then there's also like this piece itself was a self-portrait piece in a class. And so there can be something said of putting yourself in that sort of world and giving yourself a higher level than like what you have in your normal life. So sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Living vicariously through that sort of world. And yeah, so hopefully it gives that sort of sense of like world beyond just this what you're seeing. So yeah, that's basically my work. If there's any questions anybody has, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions?
Have you done any like world buildings, like when you like create like a whole fantasy world?
Well, my BFA show was doing that. Like that entire show was basing like all of my digital drawing pieces and then an animation and like building up that world and giving it like history and context and all that kind of stuff. So like this piece doesn't fit into that, but like all that work fits into that world I built.
Any other questions? Questions from Zoom?
Was there like a story or backstory behind what's happening?
Well, what I based this self-portrait on was people have told me like, Cora, if you got in a fight, I'm sure you'd win. So it's like taking that to an extreme sort of thing. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you think I'm strong, but we'll see where this goes. So it's that sort of like idea in this world. I'm fighting and hoping to win, and you would like want to root for that side sort of thing. So yeah.
Other questions?
What
Go ahead.
was the reason for using the element on the shield? Like, is there?
Well, specifically, it's hard to say because like I'm like, oh, I draw with my hands. Artists are really like all about tactile stuff, and then like this piece kind of went deeper in the project itself was because I created like these trading cards, and this was an image for one of them, and so like the hand also represented the tactile nature of like trading cards and that sort of thing, but like I didn't like how the trading card part ended up, but I did like how the image did. So I was like, we're gonna get rid of the other part and keep this. So yeah, there's that like nature of just being an artist and using your hands and working with it and that sort of thing.
Questions? I've got a question. We've talked about this kind of before, but I'd like to hear you, talk to others about that. Color is very important to you, and I think that's a big part of your work just in general. So whether or not you can talk about color in this piece, or just how you use color in general, or how you approach color, would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Well, through my work, it's not very like direct, like, oh, this has to be the color. It's more just feeling it out as I progress through the work on what completes the composition and things like that. So like talking about this piece specifically, it was like, oh, there's a lot of red up in the person in the garb, and then so the red in the enemy, the demon or whatever in the other corner, and that kind of draws a linear line and all that stuff. So it's that, and then there's the contrast between the red and the blue, and then all the colors and then the stark white of the wings and that sort of thing. So it does come together in the end, but for me, it's just sort of in the moment figuring things out.
Any other questions?
Well, thanks everybody for being here tonight. It's been cool to work on this for so many weeks and then finally be here. My name's Anna Estes. I'm primarily a photographer. And up to this point in up to this body of work in my art career, every photo series I did had to have some like deep meaning of like a symbolism in my life or things I've been interested by or commentary on like life, society. So people in my life had been telling me like, hey, now everything has to mean something. Like you can't just create art to create. It doesn't have to mean anything. And so this body of work means nothing. I was on my way to Chattanooga, 6 hours. It's all back roads, no interstates or anything. And I had my camera. I was a passenger. And I wanted to play around with long exposure for a long time. I just never had like any inspiration to do that or any real like ideas of how I was going to do that. And so I first pulled out my phone. I was doing long exposures of like social apps, and I was going to do like this commentary on like social media and how it affects our minds and the pros and cons. And I had to really stop myself and be like, that's literally like what you've been trying to like get away from. And so this was just me feeling out the process and just taking pictures in the moment. So it's all long exposure. And I guess I had some remorse for it not having a meaning because later on Instagram I did post like a narrative. Because like I said, I was like guilty that I didn't have a meaning. But now I look at this and it just symbolizes like, yeah, art can just be for fun. It doesn't have to mean anything. And you can just create to create. And so that's what it means to me, and it's really pivotal in my career. It's a big aha moment of like, yeah, things can just be. And it opened up new avenues for me. I got into commercial work, and usually commercial work doesn't mean anything. It's just for money or, a product. And so this was a huge moment in my life, and I let the viewers kind of take on whatever meaning they want it to, because when you put art into the world, it's not yours anymore, it's the viewers. And so I like to leave up, if people see anything in it, they can with their audience. So that's my piece.
So great, this kind of repeat, that's what
Yeah.
to me is repeat.
Okay.
And you're using photography as a brush, basically. And technology is making you want to, well, it's purposes, this could be a brush stroke. Is that something that excites you, or is it going to continue on with? Is that this idea of like using technology just to create like
Yeah, so since this kind of one of my, I still do like the meaningful stuff, but since this one of my like side projects, I guess you call it, is I've gotten really interested in like shadow and light, especially at night. I love taking pictures when it's like foggy outside and the light just, can't think of the word. The light just, shines through the fog and expands it. So I like come downtown and like there's neon signs or stuff. So I have a ton of pictures kind of similar to these. So I have gotten more into like abstraction since this. I think that's really cool because for a long time I just been a portrait photographer. So taking stuff that does look more like digital art or like instead of painting, that's really interesting to me because it is hard to accomplish with photography a lot of times.
So I already know these are all photographs. What about like the industry? Do you like that on that a little bit?
Sorry. What?
You know, like working in series a little bit as part of the so what's your okay with
Well, like I said, I took a lot of pictures of like my phone. I was gonna make like a commentary on like phone like apps and stuff, and I still have those pictures. But since they mean something, I had to like come away from that. So, and I usually do. I always work in series. Like I have a ton of other series, but like I said, they all do mean something. This is like one of the only series that I have, I guess, published series that I have that doesn't mean anything. My light and shadow pictures that I was talking about, I want to get those out because they are cool and they don't mean anything. But I almost always work in series, unless it's like for a client. But for me, when I do stuff, I always do a series. I don't like having just like one standalone picture. Does that answer? Okay.
We have a couple of Zoom questions. The first one is, what is each a picture of or where were they taken?
So these were all on the back roads on the way to Chattanooga. So through, I don't even know what states you drive through, Kentucky, Illinois, all of those. And honestly, I like this one, like you would think driving, you'd only get like this color since there's street lights. So I honestly have no idea how I took that one. I don't know where the colors come from, which is kind of cool that I don't remember. So yeah, they were all taken on the back roads on the way to Chattanooga, and they were taken by doing long exposure on my camera.
That was the second question, of what your exposures were. And yeah, I just wanted to know what it was set to.
It was pitch black outside, so there was slow ones like 110, 100. I think I even did. I think a couple of them. Yeah, like 110 to 100 is kind of what I stayed in. So.
I have a question.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I had a question, and you answered it so well, but I do want to state how I really appreciate how you talked about these pieces not having a meaning, that there is a freedom to that, that you can just make art to enjoy it. So I really, as you were stuck when you said, there is no meaning to this, I got a question. I want to talk more about that. You ran along and just really talked about it so well. So thank you for that. But I still want to ask a question. So I'm curious about your arrangement of it on the wall. Did you choose that? Did you think about anything else for how to display them? Yeah, how did you find this?
Well, I wanted to do this a really elaborate way of displaying them. And I don't know if these actually exist, but I want to do like a frameless floating kind of thing. And Billy and I were talking about it, and he's like, well, if it doesn't exist, you get to figure out how to make it. So I was like, yeah. So I'm gonna try to do that someday because I think it'd be really cool. Like I see like glass with like huge like magnets through it, if that makes sense at all, or like the big like metal frame, whatever they're called. And then as far as arrangement on here, I kind of just went by like weight and like subjects. Like this subject's small, so I wanted it more at the viewing level. And then this one's kind of weighted at the bottom, so it's at the bottom. Yeah, and then going back to your part of, I meant to mention that too, is like this series was really freeing as well because it's just out of your hands and it's whatever you want it to be. And I found a lot of freedom in that because I wasn't tied up in this like is my meaning that I'm trying to get across in the photo? Is it like being conveyed right? So it was really freeing just because I'm not, beating myself up for it not being the way I want it to be. Like, these are imperfect. I like them. I think they're perfect, but they're imperfect, and that's the best part about them.
Hello again, I'm Bella. I'm a ceramic emphasis, so most of my pieces are, of course, ceramic, but I do enjoy doing other artworks, like bookmaking is another major thing that I enjoy, which I have another piece in here for bookmaking. But I will be focusing on my ceramic works for tonight. So basically, most of my works focus on like simple form, and learning new techniques and pushing play to its limit and trying to use like one single massive play instead of trying to stack multiple things, which is a huge challenge. So another aspect that I really emphasize in my ceramics is the glazing. So because I do very simple forms, glaze is really important to make each piece neat. So I would focus a lot in like mixing my own glazes, finding new recipes, new combinations, stuff like that, to try to find like my favorite like pattern for the glaze, and the firing really affects that as well, like based on how the piece rests in the kiln. So because this is standing up in the kiln, it has a dripping effect on it, which I really enjoy. A lot of my pieces do have that dripping effect. And it's really a trial and error for me. So one of my favorite parts about ceramics is like just that kiln reveal, seeing what the glaze is going to end up being at the end. Sometimes it's a huge disappointment, but other times it comes out really great. Like I really love this side of the piece, but the other side did not turn out so great. So like I really enjoy those aha moments of like, oh, I made this mistake and I can fix that later. So yeah, I really emphasize color, and I work on that as well. So I'll mix blues, greens, browns. I typically prefer gem colors instead of neutral colors. So I much prefer oxidation fires to production fires. So that's pretty much most of my ceramics. So if anyone has any questions.
With the dripping effect of the glaze, does that also kind of mirror the fact that this is the canteen, the water and that sort of thing, or was that just kind of a happy accident of the firing process?
It was a happy accident. So like for this particular piece, I chose this antique looking green because the canteen that I based this off of was like a Middle Eastern style. So it was very antique looking. So I wanted an antique vibe type glaze. So that dripping effect just ended up happening with the experimental glaze,
So I know you said that you emphasize simple forms with complex glazes. Would you ever consider, going the opposite route, making a really, really complex mold but having very, very simple ways?
That's like yes and no. I do enjoy trying complex forms, but I really hate when the glaze is simple. It's just a huge disappointment to me. So I do sometimes experiment with more complex forms, but I still like to do that complex glaze combination. And if it comes out too simple, I'm really disappointed in the piece, but c'est la vie.
So I'm thinking about this piece and your installation upstairs, and I'm wondering, is it important that all your pieces at least have the appearance of some way to reference something actually?
Yeah, so most of my pottery is a reference to functional. So I love pieces that give that functionality, but still that decorative, beautiful type of form. And I used to do strictly functional, like I used to love just making mugs and tools and stuff. But as I progressed in my art career, I've grown to really enjoy like functional pottery that's also decorative. So I do a lot of bowls that have cutouts in them, so you can't really use it except for a decoration. So yeah, and the canteen, like it is totally functional. You can put water in it and drink from it, but it's too heavy. Yeah.
Are you implying that you're gonna make a mug with a hole right at the bottom, so that no one could ever use it? Is that where you're going with that?
No.
Oh.
I have accidentally done that with a bowl. It actually turned into a planter instead. So no, not on purpose.
Another question?
Lenny Mackenzie says, love her pieces.
Yes.
He asked my question too. Jump in there quick. But so I gotta pivot. I do have a question. I'm gonna pivot. It might not be as good as Justin's question. But now that you're seeing, I'm sure you've seen your work in gallery spaces before, but you see your work in this gallery space here and then that solo show up there. Can you talk a little bit more about your work in those spaces? Because ceramics can be a very personal kind of object, that we use in our daily lives. But once you get the viewer in the gallery space, what is it that you're wanting? What are you encouraging the viewer to do, think, or how do you want the viewer to relate?
So my goal is to get the viewer to just appreciate the simplicity and the beauty of functional pottery, because I know a lot of artists are all about having that huge meaning. Like Anna was saying, she always has that, big special meaning, and she wanted to experiment with her photos. So I like to do stuff that doesn't really have that huge meaning. It's just a very pleasing type thing. So that is my goal when I set all my pieces up in a show. I know a lot of people usually tend to come up and say, oh, a plant would look perfect in that, or I would love to put a flower in that. So I know a lot of people end up taking that functionality and bringing it to the next level, which is good, but sometimes it's a little too much for me because I just want the appreciation of the form itself and not take it and put a plant in it, So yeah, I just really want the viewer to appreciate the simplicity and the beauty in the forms.
Any other questions?